we're the flagship program in this state, right? And
a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit.
Money talks, bullshit walks. Welcome back, everybody, to another edition, episode 56 of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. My name is Michael Wein, live from Houston, Texas, March 27th, 9:53 p.m. Central Time, the day before the second round of the NCAA tournament kicks off, and also the day before opening day in Major League Baseball. Lots going on in the sports world. Today, we're going to discuss the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, our reactions and our takeaways to each region. Then we will get into the Sweet 16 matchups, and if our mind has changed on who's going to come out of each region to reach Phoenix and get to the Final Four, we will tell you guys what we got wrong, what we got right. And then finally, to wrap up the episode, the Longhorns just got through their fifth spring practice today out of 15 in total that they are allotted for the spring portion. And so we'll be doing one player that stood out to the media for each position if we have time for that. But before we do all that, make sure you guys like and subscribe. And let me welcome in my esteemed co-host, fellow Longhorn fan, here on this Wednesday night, right before the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, Mr. Nixon. What's up?
So, man, crazy first week of March Madness as usual. Had a lot of upsets go down. My bracket is in shambles, as it always is after the first weekend. But we'll get into all of it. I'm excited. Now, we're just going to go region by region. And which one did you want to start with?
Well, we'll kind of do what we did last time. We'll kind of zigzag through the bracket, and so we'll start in the top left with the East region. This is the UConn region. UConn being the number one overall seed. Our second weekend matchups in this region, we're going to have a title game rematch between the 1 seed UConn Huskies and the 5 seed San Diego State Aztecs. In the winner of that game will take on the 3-2 matchup between Iowa State, the 2 seed, who you picked to go to the Final Four in our original bracket show, and the 3 seed Illinois Fighting Illini, who look very dangerous right now. And that will actually be a matchup between the KenPom number 1 defense in Iowa State and the KenPom number 1 offense since the new year in Illinois. So lots going for us in this region. I'm super excited for both Sweet 16 games. But before we get to those games, what stood out to you in this region first and second rounds, if anything?
Well, right off the bat, got to start with that upset of Auburn by Yale. Just you mentioned it on our predictions episode. Like Auburn was a team that was vulnerable for sure, and Yale and really any Ivy League school that ends up in the tournament, they're always, the type of teams that are usually veteran laden and just know how to execute offensively. And you saw that with Yale. They ran their offense and then they played their, zone defense, forced Auburn into some tough shots, forced them into some bad tendencies. And then next thing you know, they walk out of there with the W. The other thing that stood out to me was definitely San Diego State. They really showed out for the first part of this, March Madness, and I wasn't sure what to expect from them coming in. We knew that they had a lot of, their talent from last year's national championship run back now for this year, but a lot of the speculation was like, is it going to be Auburn maybe, or is it going to be, Iowa State or Illinois in this bracket? And San Diego State was kind of the forgotten team out of this bracket, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how they fare against UConn next week for that national championship rematch. That's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, Yale was a team that I kind of thought could upset Auburn because if you look at the way Auburn played, they were really dominant and physical defensively, and they pride themselves on forcing turnovers. And what I mentioned in the preview pod was that, or in our bracket show, was that Yale is experienced, full of upperclassmen, and they don't get frazzled by that kind of defense. They take care of the basketball. And if they could control the pace and kind of not let Auburn generate easy offense in transition, they would have a good chance to win the game. Now, Auburn was winning up until like later on in the second half.
Yeah.
So they were still kind of hanging around. But you let a smart team like Yale hang around. They ended up getting the W. They ended up hitting the timely shots. And that's sometimes what it comes down to in March. I think the team that most impressed me, though, in the East region, aside from, of course, UConn, who just rolled through their first two games, was Illinois, the Fighting Illini.
Yeah.
When you think about what this team has done over the second half of the season, you know, they went through some adversity with the legal case regarding Terrence Shannon, who's their best player and one of the best players in America. They go on, they get hot at the end of the season. They win the Big Ten tournament. They look really good, especially offensively. There are still questions defensively, which I mentioned in the episode that we did last week before the tournament started. But they come in and they roll Duquesne, who, you know, or no, they beat but BYU in what I thought was a really impressive win, and they roll Duquesne, just a team that was hot at the end of the season, and people thought maybe looking to upset Illinois in that first round, and they rolled past them as the 14 seed. Then they beat BYU, or not BYU. Who was the team that beat? Who
So
did they?
they beat Morehead State and then
Yes,
Duquesne. Duquesne was the
yeah,
one that beat BYU.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So, yeah, I mean, Morehead State was a team that people thought could hang with Illinois, and that was not the case at all. When you think about what Illinois has, they just have a combination of guys who can go get you a bucket and are elite in isolation. Uh, the question with Illinois offensively is, are they going to get consistent elite point guard play? And they've been getting that, man. Marcus Domas, Terrence Shannon Jr., Coleman Hawkins, all can knock down shots from the perimeter, all can get their own bucket. I was really impressed with Illinois. And if I was UConn, just looking ahead prematurely, I would much rather want to face Iowa State than I would Illinois, just because I think Illinois, with their ability to make shots, spread the floor, and win in one-on-one situations with their athleticism, I just think that might pose some problems, especially for the UConn defense. But we'll get to that in a second. I thought UConn was dominant, just as I expected them to be.
Yeah.
I think that's really it, though. I think that's really it for the first and second round games in the East region. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we get into the second weekend in this region?
No. I think that does it for that. The Sweet 16 games for this region, it's UConn and San Diego State, and then Illinois and Iowa State, as you mentioned. Um, let's start with UConn and San Diego State. What are you looking for in that matchup? And also just what do you think San Diego State can do defensively? Like obviously they're already a fantastic defensive team, but this UConn team, the problems they cause offensively with how, you know, cohesive of a unit it is. What can they do to stop this juggernaut?
Well, that's a great question. That's the question I think um, the 15 other teams in this tournament are probably asking themselves right about now. And San Diego State, given that they played this team last year in the championship game, might have a little extra motivation. There are three things you got to do, though, to beat UConn if you're San Diego State. Number one, Jaden Ledee has to find a way to get Donovan Clean in foul trouble. That's number one. If you don't get Clean in foul trouble, he's just too much of a dominant force on both ends that I don't think San Diego State will be able to handle over the course of 40 minutes. You saw what he did in the round of 32 game against Northwestern with 8 blocks, and that doesn't account for all the other shots that he was altering. Just his presence. Just it's what did he have? 14 points, 14 rebounds, and 8 blocks. It was just, he's so good, and I don't think he's really even like cracked his ceiling or cracked his potential on the offensive end of the floor and the athleticism that he has. But you have to get him in foul trouble. And Jaden Ledee, who was an All-American this year, I think can hang with him. He's a little smaller, and he's more of a face-up forward more so than a five-man like Klingon that can bang with him physically down low. But he is built, broad shoulders, really strong. But if you're Jalen Ledee, you got to get him in foul trouble. Find a way to take UConn out of their game. On defense, I think this is actually a better matchup for San Diego State than people are giving it credit for defensively, just because they have the length and athleticism and the guards that can physically impose their will on Cam Spencer, on Alex Caravan, on Tristan Newton. They can match up one-on-one on the defensive end of the floor. So you have to find a way to take UConn out of their system offensively because they're so precise and they're so good at running it that if you don't do anything to disrupt it, you got no shot. And then the third thing you have to do is you have to make your open threes. I would say San Diego State probably needs to shoot close to 40% from three to win this game offensively. There are some offensive limitations to San Diego State, but that's not to say that they cannot, on one night in March, get hot and knock down a good percentage of their three-pointers. However, I don't know if they're going to be able to check all three of those boxes. I think they'll hang. Brian Dutcher's done a fantastic job with this program. 2 straight Sweet 16 appearances, including a championship game appearance last year. But I just think UConn's too good. Tristan Newton can take over. Caravan and Spencer knock down open shots at a very consistent rate. They run their system. Klingon's dominant on the defensive end. He's the heart and soul of the team. Hassan Diarra comes off the bench and gives him a scoring punch. Samson Johnson is a good 1-2 punch with Klingon. I just don't think San Diego State will be able to do enough. But of all the programs left, people aren't giving enough respect to San Diego State.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I alluded to earlier also. This defense is just so good. If you think about the run that they had last year through the tournament, it was, they were able to win in multiple ways, obviously, their offense did, hold its own and do its job. But the defense was extremely consistent, and no matter what matchup they faced, it just felt like they hounded everybody. Now, everything you said, I agree with it. I think on top of that, though, too, I think a big key will be just early on in the game, they got to come out with a physical imposition to the game. Because I think if they can somehow bring that physicality and get these guards and ball handlers a little bit uncomfortable, early on in the game, maybe off their rhythm. And obviously you mentioned that with, impacting their sets and all that type of stuff. But just ball pressure and little things like that to make them think a little bit more about every little thing that they do. Those little things matter. And San Diego State does a great job of that. So if they're able to, get UConn's guards off their game a little bit with that ball pressure and with that physicality, It could be a much closer game than people think. I'm still going to pick UConn, though.
So what are you looking for in this game between Iowa State and Illinois? Because as I mentioned, it's the number one offense against the number one defense. You have picked Iowa State to go to the Final Four. What are you looking for, and are you still with Iowa State, or are you changing your pick?
I'm still with Iowa State for this game, but in terms of the Final Four, it's so hard not to pick against UConn. You know, seeing this train roll as it is right now, it's hard to envision it being stopped. So for this game in particular, though, I'm looking at what is Iowa State doing to affect Terrence Shannon. Terrence Shannon, as you mentioned, is one of the best players in the country. Extremely quick off the dribble, can get to the rim, has a good jump shot. I mean, in terms of scoring punch, there's not a lot of better guards than Terrence Shannon Jr. So here's the thing. I mean, I think Iowa State, they have the defense to be able to affect him and be able to slow him down. And I think Terrence Shannon is the engine to this thing. This offense that Illinois has that has been, tops in the country since January 1st. Terrence Shannon is the engine, in my opinion. So if you can, affect him, then everything else will be affected along with it.
Yeah, I agree. Here are my questions for both teams, real fast. For Iowa State, we know about their guards. We know about Keshawn Gilbert. We know about Tamin Lipsey, who was an All Big 12 performer this year. And we know about their defense. We know they're going to guard. We know they're going to be physical. We know they're going to be tough to score against. In order to be this Illinois team, though, coached by Brad Underwood, it's going to come down to, I believe, the shot making of Milan Momcilovic. If you watch this Iowa State team, he's been one of the better stories in college basketball. He's a freshman, and he's a matchup issue for a lot of opposing defenses just because he plays small forward. He's 6'8". He usually has the height advantage over his opponent, and he's kind of that do-it-all kind of wing, versatile wing. And if they want to be able to match up with Coleman Hawkins, if they want to be able to match up with the scoring of Terrence Shannon, they need their wing to perform big time on the offensive end. They need him to perform the way that he's performed this season. When you watch Momcilovic, you kind of see a little bit of I'm not comparing him, but you kind of see a little bit of Dirk with those 1 foot fadeaways that he shoots. Yeah. He's just kind of unstoppable when he's on. And so Iowa State needs him to perform like he can perform. But sometimes as the pressure ramps up in these tournaments, it can get to freshmen a little bit. So, I mean, we've seen that multiple times with a team we're going to talk about soon. So we'll see how Momcilovic perform, but they're going to need a good weekend from him if they want to make the Final Four. And then in terms of Illinois, can they continue to guard like they did last weekend? If they can do that, they could beat UConn. I think they might have the best chance of any team remaining to beat UConn. Either way, though, I think that Elite Eight game might be UConn's toughest test on its way to possibly back to the championship game. I just have a weird feeling about this Illinois team, the way that they can score. And you saw them defend this past week, and that's what's gotten them here. And you can say what you want about the level of competition. It's probably not what they're going to see this weekend, but you play who they put in front of you.
Yeah, and the intensity and the attention to detail, it passed the eye test. There's no question.
Exactly.
They're flying around.
And it's not like the defensive struggles have never been personnel related.
Right.
Illinois has the personnel to be a good switchable unit on the defensive end. They have the athleticism. It's just they're so good offensively that sometimes they just
Lose focus a little bit.
lose focus. Maybe it's sort of an effort thing on that end of the floor. I think it is probably some of that. So if they can just buy in for 10, 15 minutes a game on the defensive end, they're one of those teams, like a group of teams we talked about last week, that could be dangerous. But either way, I'm still picking UConn out of this region.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's move down the bracket and let's talk about two games that'll actually go on tomorrow. The UNC region. What region is this again?
West. The
West. The West region. What stood out to you in the first round? We had, Carolina roll past Wagner. Michigan State gave them a good first half, but Carolina ended up rolling in that game. We had Alabama beat Charleston. We had Grand Canyon with the upset of St. Mary's. We had Dayton with the incredible comeback on Nevada. We had Clemson beat Baylor after they beat New Mexico. What stood out to you in this region?
Clemson to me was the big surprise. I had them losing in the first round to New Mexico,
So did
and
I.
for them to come out and kind of blow the doors off them a little bit. Ended up winning by 21 in a rout, holding New Mexico State, one of the Mountain West's best offenses, to 56 points. Extremely impressive stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Baylor win, holding Baylor to 64 points. Another impressive performance defensively. That to me is the barometer, I think, for Clemson. Is like, you look at those two scoring lines, you don't even have to look at the box scores. And you're just like, whoa, like they're defending at a high level. That really caught me off guard because that wasn't a team that I had really been watching throughout this season. So seeing them defend at that high of a level against these offenses that I had regarded very highly was the big surprise to me.
Yeah. I think the Mountain West failures kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a fine line the committee has to walk between getting the best teams in and getting the most deserving teams in. I think the way they go about it is they get the most deserving teams in, and the Mountain West was deserving of getting the 6 teams they had in the tournament. It didn't go so hot in the first weekend. They only get one of those to advance to the Sweet 16, whereas I thought they could potentially get at least 2 or 3 to the Sweet 16,
Yeah.
as I picked. But, I mean, Clemson, and this plays a part in that, they played really well. And I was this is why you can't correlate always conference tournament success to NCAA tournament success. Sometimes it works out that way. We've seen what Illinois was able to do on their hot streak. We see what NC State has been able to do to get to the Sweet 16, but not always. And Clemson, they lost their first and only game in the ACC tournament. They lost by 21 to Boston College. And I think people kind of, including myself, made the mistake of, oh, well, here's a hot New Mexico team. They're, Clemson's coming off a terrible loss to a bad Boston College team. They got dominated. Let's go with the new toy. Let's go with New Mexico. We think they're better offensively. And some of that was probably fair, but I think we kind of soiled on Clemson a little bit too early. And what Clemson was able to do, well, they were able to guard both in the Baylor and New Mexico game. They were able to stay in front of those longer athletic guards, make it tough on them, make them take tough contested shots. They were able to close out those possessions with defensive rebounds. They were able to keep PJ Hall out of foul trouble, and their guards played better than they had in the previous couple of games leading into the tournament. Chase Hunter is so important for this Clemson team. Their point guard, in that Boston College game, he played 31 minutes, had just 2 points, and shot 0 of 10 from the field. That makes a big difference. When your point guard doesn't play well, it's hard to win for any team. And he kind of got his groove back offensively this weekend, or this past weekend. Scored 40, I think it was 41 points over the first 2 games of the tournament. And that helps. And PJ Hall stays out of foul trouble. You play good defense. This is what it looks like. And we're going to talk about the ACC because year after year, we talk about how it doesn't look like it's a good conference. And then they end up getting what we have now, where 25% of the Sweet 16 is the ACC. So it's an interesting conversation centered around the ACC and their tournament performance. But Clemson impressed me. I thought Dayton really impressed me just with their perseverance and coming back from that big deficit. I believe it was 17 or 18 points against Nevada. And look, I mean, that was something else. But
Put up a good fight against Arizona as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's really it. In terms of, let me ask you this. In terms of, so I had UNC coming out of this region. You had UNC coming out of the region as well, right?
Yep.
So has anything changed in your mind? Looking at these matchups, we got Clemson and Arizona in what is a 6-2 matchup.
Yep.
And then we have North Carolina and Alabama in the 1-4 matchup tomorrow night. Has anything changed in your mind, or are you sticking with the Tar Heels?
Yeah, I'm sticking with the Tar Heels, but definitely the teams that made it through are a lot different this time around. Were a lot different than what I envisioned. Outside of North Carolina, I think this was one of the regions that I really got wrong outside of North Carolina. I had Alabama losing early on. I had Nevada making it through to the Sweet 16. So I think for right now, I'm completely I'm bought in on North Carolina. I think they'll win a tight one with Alabama, probably a high scoring game. But I think Arizona is a real threat for sure, and definitely Alabama could definitely find themselves in the Final Four.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say. A couple questions on those 2 teams you just mentioned, because I am sticking with the Tar Heels. I just trust them this year.
Yeah.
They're different. They play defense, and they've got more than just a couple guys that can get a bucket when you need it. For Arizona, they can get to the Final Four. They can get to Phoenix, where they could have pretty much like a home court advantage for the Final Four next weekend. But the key for them is Kylan Boswell. One of their guards, they're going to need him to remain locked in gear. You look at, what he's been able to do this year. Let's see. He's averaging 11.3 points on 44% from threes and 46% from twos with 4 assists in the team's wins this season. But he's only averaging about 4.7 points, 15% from three, 26% on twos in their 8 losses this year. He's the key. He drives their offense, and his physicality defensively helps out Caleb Love on that end of the floor. Not to say that Caleb Love has been bad defensively. He's actually been pretty good this year. But he's their other guard, and they rely on him a lot to drive the offense, to facilitate. He needs to play big in this weekend. And if he does, Arizona has enough surrounding pieces with Umar Ballo on the interior to match up with a team like Carolina, who's got Armando Bacot. So that's Arizona. Good for them, though, for getting kind of the proverbial monkey off their back and getting to the second weekend.
Yeah.
And then for Alabama, as we talked about, it's about their defensive intensity, kind of like, but to a larger extent, it's kind of, that's what is going to propel them farther than they've already made it so far. Nate Oates is a fantastic coach. And the fact that he's been mentioned in coaching rumors probably kind of hasn't helped the situation a whole lot, just because you don't want to listen to all that outside noise while you're trying to make a run deep into the
Yeah.
tournament.
Yeah.
But I thought, outside of, let's see, what was it? Outside of the first round game where they gave up 96 to College of Charleston, we knew College of Charleston had the firepower to compete with Alabama. So that wasn't so much a surprise, but I thought their defense in the Grand Canyon game really impressed me, holding Grand Canyon to 61 points. Grand Canyon has a star in Tyon Grant Foster, who not a lot of people knew about coming into the tournament, but he showed out. I thought their physicality in holding Grand Canyon scoreless for a span of the final 4 minutes really, really impressed me. If they can do that against North Carolina, it'll be harder, but if they can do that, they'll have a chance to win it in the end. I really believe that, just because their offense is so high octane. Mark Sears was an All-American. And either way, though, this region works out. I'm just hoping that we get, first of all, tomorrow we're going to get Mark Sears against RJ Davis. That's going to be high-level guard play. And then we could get the matchup that everyone, I think, wants to see, with Caleb Love going against RJ Davis and his former team in the Elite Eight. So, yeah, we're both sticking with North Carolina. What's the top right region? Can you tell me what that is? I think it's the South, right? The Houston region?
Yes, it is. It's the
Okay.
Houston region.
Okay. So what stood out to you in this region from the first weekend?
Well, I think to me it's Duke. Duke really stepped on their opponents this the first weekend. They came out and they absolutely routed Vermont, and then turned around and did the same with James Madison. But it wasn't just that they completely blew those teams out. It was how they looked while doing it. It was completely dominant. Left no chance of like uncertainty at all. And it seems like they're really finding, or not finding, but just they're playing their best ball at the right time. They're really cooking right now. The other thing would obviously be Oakland and that story in that first round game with what's his name? With what's his name hitting all those threes. I think it ended up being 10 or 11 threes in that game.
Yeah. Jack Golke,
To beat
Jack Golke, the new Fletcher McGee, the new Steph Curry.
Yeah, to beat Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty insane stuff. And then of course the overtime game between Houston and
A&M.
A&M was insane. Houston was up 13, I think, with like 5 minutes left or something, and it just was. I mean, that's March Madness. I mean, that you see that kind of stuff all the time.
Texas A&M, along with a couple other teams. I mean, you look at that team with that guard play and that the athletes they had on that team. They're one of those teams that, I mean, they were picked to finish second in the SEC preseason for a reason, and you kind of saw it in that game. I mean, you saw how they could score, how they could compete with Houston athletically, their firepower. They're one of those teams that I think at the end of the day can be proud of the fight that they put up, with Houston. A team that's just so physical and has been great all year and one of the best leagues in the sport. But I think they're going to be kicking themselves a little bit. Looking back on that game, just kind of thinking about, man, did we really get enough out of this team? I mean, we saw what this team could do. It just doesn't feel like, along with some other teams from the first weekend, didn't really get enough out of what they had on their roster. And there are questions being raised about Buzz Williams and his future at A&M. But at the very least, he did what he hasn't done in the past couple of years, and that was win a game in the tournament over Nebraska, where they did look good.
Yeah.
And after they won that game against Nebraska, I was like, oh, shit. It's kind of a dangerous matchup for Houston. Here's what I'll say. Like, obviously, Duke's a big story. Kentucky's a big story. Those are the blue bloods in this region. Those were the big stories going in. Like, I picked Kentucky to go to the Final Four. Obviously, that was a little too ambitious looking back on it. But that was their ceiling. I still believe that.
Yeah.
The story, I think, not a lot of people are talking about, or maybe they are, and it's just being overshadowed by Kentucky, is Houston. And I don't know why, but I kind of have a problem with the way that people talk about Houston, just the way that they talk about their style of play and the fact that, oh, this team can't score, and wow, they scored 100 points. Like, that was some novel concept. I didn't even pick Houston to go to the Final Four. So I'm not even, arguing that they're going to beat Duke, because I actually think Duke's going to win the game. Looking back on it now, I think Houston has some glaring depth issues that I didn't foresee, especially with this Jerron Roberts shin injury that is going on. I just don't know if they have enough interior scoring to go up against Kyle Filipowski and Mark Mitchell. And Duke, I mean, Jared McCain is cold-blooded. Like,
Yeah,
he's
man.
one of those dudes in this tournament. He's probably arguably the best freshman in this tournament. But anywho,
When I watch him, I'm thinking like, what pick is he going in the draft? Because I haven't heard a lot of like NBA drafts buzz or anything with this class, but I'll watch him and I'm like, oof, like what team is gonna snatch him up in the lottery?
yeah, I just think it's weird. I guess, I mean, it's kind of their style of play that doesn't really allow for them to have those offensive explosions. And they needed they needed a great game from Emmanuel Sharp. I think he scored over 30 points in that game. They needed, good games from Jamal Shed and LJ Cryer, all three of those guys to perform to get there. And they also needed overtime. But at the same time, like, this team can score. They just don't always do it because they don't always have to.
Yeah, yeah.
And their style of play with less possessions and stuff. It's just weird. I don't know. But anywho,
It reminds me of like the Virginia conversation from a few years ago when they had Hunter and those years with Brogdon. I mean, those teams could score. It was
right.
just that they, like you said, most of the time they don't even need to.
It is 5 straight Sweet 16s for Kelvin Sampson. So there's something to be said for that. So he's doing something right. But I think there are some glaring issues with this Houston team. Not that they couldn't beat Duke because of their physicality, because that's kind of been the concern with Duke all year. Like, are they dogs? Are they going to be able to go nose to nose with some of these more physical teams?
Yeah.
But I think foul trouble is an issue for Houston because they don't have a lot of depth. I think the lack of bench scoring could be an issue for them. And, if one of these guys gets in foul trouble, if say Emmanuel Sharp gets in foul trouble or Jerron Roberts gets in foul trouble, it spells trouble for Houston.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to rely, I think, a lot more on their defense to bother Duke, and they're going to have to stay out of foul trouble if they want to win that game. But I changed my mind. I think I had Houston going to the Elite Eight. I think they're going to lose to Duke in that game. I think it's on Friday night.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think I had Duke beating Houston, and then I think you originally had Duke beating Houston, then you changed your mind at the end of the episode or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that game is one that when we were making our brackets, like that's one you have circled as like a potential barn burner for sure.
Do you think that NC State can keep the run going and beat Marquette, or do you think Marquette gets the job done?
Well, I don't think it's out of the question. I mean, I'm not I'm definitely not as high as some people on Marquette. Like I think Tyler Kolek, you can force him right, and you can force him in. He's not nearly as dynamic as a driver and as a scorer going to his right hand. I think they have a good mix of scoring in their starting unit, obviously, but I think Marquette they need a little bit more punch off the bench as well. I think that's kind of a big deal for them.
Yeah. Look, the matchup to watch in that game is DJ Burns against Oso Igudaro. They're
Yeah,
two different styles, but they're going to be matched up against each other. The question for NC State is just, do they have, any gas left in the tank? Um,
they've
you
played a
know,
lot of basketball.
they played a lot of basketball over the last 2 weeks. Um, and it wears down on you, and it can catch up to you eventually. You know, I love watching DJ Burns. He's one of the more fun players to watch in college basketball right now. 300-pound ballerina is what they're calling him. 42 minutes, though, in overtime in that Oakland game. Just all the adrenaline. Will they have enough left? I mean, I think they have the horses to make a deeper run, but against this Marquette team, you got to chase around Tyler Kolek. You got to chase around the athleticism and the shot making of a Cam Jones. I think
Yeah,
Cam Jones is a difference maker here.
yeah.
And I just don't know if DJ Burns will be able to hang with the versatility of Oso Igudaro in those pick and rolls the entire game. And I don't know. I feel like Marquette is ready for the moment. I feel like they'll make the Elite Eight. But I do
Yeah,
have Duke. I changed my mind, and I'm picking Duke to get to the Final Four.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe doing a prize pick slip for the Sweet 16 games, and Cam Jones is definitely one of those guys that I'm looking at for sure. He's consistent. He's extremely consistent.
Absolutely. Final region is the Midwest region. What stood out to you in the Midwest region? This was the Purdue, Tennessee region.
I think this region, what stood out is there wasn't really any upsets.
Yeah.
It was all the front runners taking care of business until, of course, Gonzaga did beat Kansas, which was 5 versus a 4 seed. But I mean, even then, Gonzaga. I mean, I would have favored them in that matchup with how Kansas is right now and how battered they were heading into that game. So I think this region, it's anyone's ball game right now. Like in terms of making it to the Final Four, um, I could see it with any of these 4 teams. If I'm being entirely honest, there's no team that I'm like I don't see them getting past blah 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 team. Like I think any one of these 4 teams could do it.
The team that actually impressed me the most, even though they're not in the Sweet 16, was Oregon. I just thought that team had enough horses to get here. I mean, Jermaine Couisnard, unbelievable. 32 points in the Creighton game. Infali Dante, 28 points. They had that dynamic duo and enough shooters around them. I thought Dana Altman did a really nice job with that team, winning the Pac-12 tournament. They were hot coming in. They put up a fight against Creighton. They took them to double overtime. And outside of that, crazy A&M Houston game, that might have been the game of the first weekend, that
Yeah.
Creighton-Oregon game. Just the level of shot making in that game was nuts. But yeah, I mean, I thought they impressed me. I thought this is Dithole, so I thought, the fight that Texas showed in the Tennessee game was admirable, but I just thought the way that the Texas went out with those 19 turnovers wasn't the way they needed to go out. I know they didn't shoot the ball well, and sometimes your shots aren't falling, but I mean, they had 3 turnovers on inbounds passes. It's just not really the way that you want to go out, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
But give credit to Tennessee. Like, they showed they could win a game that they've lost in past tournaments where they don't shoot the ball well. They kind of tense up a little bit offensively. But their defense and their physicality, obviously, were able to bother Texas enough to where Tyrese Hunter and Max Abmas, Dylan Dessou weren't able to get off on these big offensive runs that they're usually able to. So I think that Tennessee Creighton game is the game that we focus on here.
Yeah.
What are you looking for in that game? And who do you think wins it?
Well, immediately I look at Kalkbrenner for Creighton on the interior. I think what he's able to do on the inside, scoring wise, I think might be the difference. To me, I think Tennessee is very well, not perimeter oriented in terms of like all of their scoring coming from the perimeter. It's more so like they rely a lot on their guards to make shots. Zakai Ziegler, Connect, all those guys, they got to make their shots and they got to um, always be productive for that team to be good offensively. So I think Creighton has that inside outside scoring, and I think that's where I give them the slight edge.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that quartet of Trey Alexander, Baylor Shireman, Ryan Kalkbrenner. It's the thing about Creighton is they don't foul. So it's going to be harder if you're Tennessee, if you're not making shots, to, number one, get offensive rebounds like they were able to do against Texas because Ryan Kalkbrenner's there and he's one of the best. But also just to generate secondary offense.
Yeah.
I think Creighton has enough shot making with Baylor Shireman, who's excellent, doesn't get enough credit for how good he is, and Trey Alexander, who can match up and has the athleticism to match up with Dalton Connect and kind of at least make it tougher on him, like Texas was kind of able to do with Dylan Mitchell. I think, I'd lean Creighton in that game. I don't know why. I just have a feeling that Greg McDermott, who's done such a great job with this team, getting them to their third Sweet 16 in 4 years, is going to get them back to where they kind of fell short last year in the Elite Eight. I think it's going to be Purdue and Creighton in the Elite Eight, though I'm still sticking with Zach Edey and this Purdue team. They really impressed me. It was just something I needed to see from them, and they got that monkey off their back, and now I think they're rolling. I think they're going to roll into the Final Four.
Yeah, they're a polarizing team going into the tournament. Like a lot of people are still like, I don't know, maybe they'll fumble again. But I think for us both, like we were both very adamant, thinking like this Purdue team is different with the maturity of their guard play. Lawyer, Smith, the shooting they have around uh, Zach Edey. It's a more complete team, and they also just have a, I think, more efficient way of getting Edey the ball as well with that high-low game rather than getting it to him on like the left block or the right block. They're getting it to him in the middle where he can take a dribble, go to either shoulder, and I think it just works. Like they've found their what's the word for that? Just strategy that works best for them. That really optimizes everything.
Yeah. Not only is it maturity with Braden Smith and Fletcher Royer, it's that added X factor that they have this year in Lance Jones,
Yeah,
who his offensive emergence this year just gives him that extra offensive threat. And he's going to be pivotal against a team like Gonzaga that isn't the best defensively. But can make shots, and I'm actually really impressed with the job Mark Few has done with this team, just because 3 weeks ago they were on the bubble, like really on the bubble. There was a question whether or not they were actually going to be in this tournament. But I think it's 9 consecutive Sweet 16s from Mark Few.
yeah, that is incredible.
It's incredible consistency, and he's a top 3 coach in college basketball, no question about it in my mind. And this week can just prove that once again. But
This might be a stupid question, but it popped in my head, so fuck it. I'm gonna throw it out there. If Kentucky opened up their unlimited checkbook and was like, "We'll pay you an insane amount of money, Mark Few, to come coach at Kentucky," do you think he would do it?
No, I don't. But I don't know. I just think Mark Few is close enough, I think, to the end of his. He's closer to the end of his coaching career than the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think if Kentucky was going to make a change, they'd be looking on the younger side. And I don't know if Mark Few and his family would be willing to uproot themselves out of Spokane, Washington, where they've spent the last however many years, 2+ decades, to go to Kentucky at this point in time and try to change everything there. Where there's an even higher level of pressure to win and win instantly. But who knows? As I mentioned at the beginning in my intro, money talks, bullshit walks. So who knows?
Yeah.
But Zach Edey in the first round. We can't mention the Midwest without talking about what Zach Edey did, right? 50 points, 35 rebounds, and 65% shooting through 2 games. The first guy to do that since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the tournament. It's something special. People need to appreciate.
I didn't realize it was that much. Holy fuck.
Yeah. At halftime of one of the games, he had like 21 points and 12 rebounds. I was like, huh?
Yeah,
it didn't even, the crazy thing is it doesn't even feel like that. It's just like he does it.
No, it doesn't.
And it's just, yeah. But yeah, I have a Edey and this Purdue team getting through to the Sweet 16. Although I do think Creighton can pose some issues with, because they have that guy who doesn't foul, who's dominant as a shot blocker, and can at least match up with the monster that is Zach Edey and Ryan Kalkbrenner. I don't think Tennessee has that. I think if you're Purdue, you're actually hoping Tennessee comes out of that game rather than Creighton. But what do I know? Okay. Anything else? So I have my final 4. It's pretty much the same. I just changed Duke. Obviously, Kentucky got knocked out, so I had to change that. And you pretty much kept yours the same, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, for this region, I'm just changing who I think will get to the Elite Eight. I think Creighton is going to beat Tennessee.
Okay, fair enough.
And then between Creighton and Purdue, I'm like, oh, that's so tough. I think I'm going to still stick with Purdue, but fuck, man, like I don't I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, don't second guess yourself. Don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we'll go until 11. Here on Dit Hole. I wanted to talk about the women's side of things, just really fast.
Yeah.
Before we get to some Texas football team notes. I need to pull up the bracket. But I just want real quick, rapid fire, final four picks for the women's side of things. So let me pull up the bracket.
Well,
really
I
fast.
have my bracket here. I can give you mine really quick.
Okay.
So for me, I had South Carolina and Stanford playing in the Final Four, and then Iowa and USC.
Okay. Interesting. So I'm gonna go. I'll go Iowa. I want to see an Iowa LSU rematch in the Elite Eight. And I think Caitlin Clark she's gonna get them there. I will go USC, although I want to see USC UConn in the Elite Eight. Paige Beckers
That'll
against
be interesting.
Juju Watkins. I don't want to roll with all number one seeds. That's the thing. And I don't want to pick against Texas, but Gonzaga's dangerous. And I don't know. I think I'll pick Stanford. I don't feel great about it, but I'll pick Stanford, and then I'll go South Carolina. Who's winning it all, though? Who do you think is going to win it all in the women's bracket?
In
We can
my
go.
bracket, I had Iowa, but
I'll go South Carolina.
yeah, I think South Carolina might have the most complete team on the women's side. To me, like the most like intriguing part of the women's side of the bracket is like just all the star power.
Yes,
But
that's why we're
South
talking
Carolina,
about it.
it's just like their team is just so stacked.
That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah,
The star power is unbelievable on the women's side. If you haven't watched any of the women's tournament yet, watch this weekend. I believe
yeah,
their games start on
so good.
Friday. We'll do a deeper dive of the women's Final Four next week when we have more time. But yeah, I think I would side South Carolina, although it's hard to go wire to wire undefeated.
Yeah,
That's my biggest worry with South Carolina. And it is kind of a entirely newly built roster. They lost a lot from last year to the WNBA, I believe.
yeah,
What Don Staley has done to kind of build that team and get it to where it is, where it's undefeated going into the second weekend of the tournament is pretty unbelievable. But
insane.
you talk about the star power. I mean, Juju Watkins, Caitlin Clark, Madison Booker, Paige Beckers for UConn. I mean, she's
Girl from Notre Dame also.
right. I mean, it's on and on and on. It's just, yeah, I'm excited to watch the women's side of things play out. But hopefully, Madison Booker and Aaliyah Moore for Texas can get them to at least the Final Four. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah,
Alabama gave them a good run on I think it was Sunday, but Madison Booker and Aaliyah Moore proved too much. So hopefully Texas can keep that going. All right, that's that for that tournament talk. Enjoy the second weekend. We'll do a Final Four breakdown like we always do next week. And then the next week will be Masters preview. So there's that. And then starting not next week, but actually we might start it next week, but definitely the week after, we're going to be bringing back portal nuggets, coaching nuggets, everything for
yeah.
college basketball. So keep an eye out for that. Gonna go rapid fire, position by position on the Texas football team. Who's standing out? Gonna give you one name at each position. Does that sound good to you? And I want your
Yep.
rapid fire reactions. So here we go. Starting with quarterback. Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning have both been good, but that was kind of expected coming in. Arch was really good at Monday's practice with his deep ball, but the nod here goes to true freshman Trey Owens because he's earned praise both publicly and privately from the coaching staff for his poise, his confidence, and his arm talent. We talked about his
6'6"
size.
kid.
Yeah, the 6'5", 236-pound freshman out of Sci-Fair here in Houston. His arm and his confidence in the throws that he's been making at practice, really, really impressive. So Trey Owens gets the shout out at the quarterback position.
Nice.
Okay. Running back, again, kind of like the quarterback position. Much of the focus has been or was coming in on CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue. Those are the 1-2, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call them. But Trey Wisner is been a guy that's getting a lot of praise in that room, not only for his work as a running back, but he's kind of the guy that's going to be expected to fill some of Keelan Robinson's shoes on special teams. He was awesome on special teams last year, very underrated. But the sophomore from that 2023 recruiting class, he's shown burst, he's shown some good wiggle, and he was really, really good during Saturday's live scrimmage portion of practice. So watch out for Trey Wisner. He wasn't necessarily the higher profile recruit like Jarrett Gibson was, like CJ Baxter was, but he's got something in him. He's a dog. Wide receiver, Isaiah Bond is the name that sticks out here. He's been the most frequently mentioned at the position thanks to his route running and his speed. He's the real deal, as a source within the program described it. And so far, it's been him, Jonte Cook, and DeAndre Moore running with the ones, as I mentioned on our last episode last week. But keep an eye out for Ryan Wingo, who has been getting some run with the ones already. Tight end. Juan Davis is the guy to keep an eye out here. Many have predicted a breakout senior season for Gunnar Helm after what was an encouraging junior season last year. And those are wise people. I think Gunnar Helm's going to play a big part in this offense because he's one of the tight ends in this room that is solid as a blocker and is good as a pass catcher. He does both. But Juan Davis has shown some really nice things in practice. Not a lot of mainstream Texas fans know who Juan Davis is, but he's kind of the guy right now in the middle of Gunnar Helm and Amari Nyblack. Watch out for Juan Davis. He's also one of those guys that is going to be important on special teams. Let me get through the offense, and then you can give some of your reactions. So offensive line, Cam Williams, who's going to be expected to fill in at that right tackle spot. We've heard he's been good, but he's having a bit of an issue with quickness off the edge, the quickness that Texas currently has off the edge. Trey Moore, Colin Simmons, Barron Sorrell, you name it, Ethan Burke. So, that's raised some questions about his weight. He is a bigger dude. If he reaches his full potential, I think he could actually turn into a Kelvin Banks type player on that side, but it's brought into the equation Trevor Gooseby, who's looked really good, and Brandon Baker as well. So that's the offense. What stands out to you from that spiel? Anything?
To me, it's probably that last bit about the offensive tackle spot. Right tackle, I think for this year, it's going to be really important. That's the position where we're not going to have the experience to lean on. Like it's going to be a first year starter. So going into the SEC, you're going to see a lot of high quality edge rushers, possible first round pick edge rushers. So that's going to be the main point of concern on the offensive line, no matter who's in that spot right now. It's going to be a question mark.
Yeah, I agree. To the defense, real fast. At the edge position, the player getting the most praise from the coaching staff, Trey Moore, the UTSA transfer. He's been as advertised. Sark mentioned in his press conference on Monday that Moore has been a stud through the winter offseason conditioning program and has arrived with kind of a chip on his shoulder to prove that he can play at this higher level of college football. And, he's clearly put on some weight, and he's looked really good in practice. So he's the guy that's not that other players aren't performing well, but he's the guy that has gotten the most praise and publicity. There's also been some good things said about Ethan Burke. Quality sources think that he has even more upside to put on the field this year. I think we could see Ethan Burke being closer to a double-digit sack guy this upcoming season than like where he was this past year, around 5.5 sacks. Those two guys are the guys that really stand out so far. Linebacker, David Binda. Like we all know about Anthony Hill. He could potentially be the best player on this team, period. But David Binda was one of the best defenders on the field during Saturday's scrimmage portion of practice. And he's also kind of the leader, one of the leaders of this defense and the leader of this position group, as he's been in the program the longest. They have a bunch of younger guys behind Anthony Hill and David Binda. Anthony Hill is still young as a player going into his sophomore season. David Binda is the elder statesman there. And he was criticized a lot early on in his career, but he stayed the course, got his opportunity, played well last year, and is really showing out in practice this so far in spring. Cornerback, Jahdae Barron is making noise. He's looked good at both corner and the nickel position. He could get an opportunity to play both. I think one of the reasons he came back
corner and what?
And the nickel, where he typically plays, the slot. He's going to get an opportunity, I think, to play both. He had an interception in the one of the live portions of practice last week. I think he's probably going to play mostly in the slot where he's used to playing, but he stood out at both positions. And right now, Malik Muhammad is dealing with a little bit of an injury. Nothing serious, nothing to worry about, but he's missed the last couple practices. So I think that's given the opportunity to Jahdae Barron and a guy like Kobe Black to kind of show what they can do out there. So not that Malik Muhammad is going to lose his job or anything, but there's that. Jalen Gilbo has also had a very strong winter, and it seems to have carried over into the spring. And so if Jahdae Barron ends up playing more of the outside corner, you could see Jalen Gilbo or one of these other guys fill in the slot. Remember, Andrew Makuba could also potentially fill in there. So the way that the secondary works out is going to be interesting, especially at the safety position, because so far they've had Derek Williams, who we expected, and Michael Taff in the first team at safety, and then they've had Andrew Makuba and Xavier Filsaime, the second team safety. I think we could see Texas kind of have two separate teams of safeties that they rotate in this year, whereas last year it was just kind of who's who between Derek Williams, Jaron Thompson, Michael Taff, and Keaton Crawford, who was great on special teams, but was a liability in pass coverage. Let's be honest here. And since he has transferred, the overall thing that I think stands out to me is the overall speed and athleticism in the secondary is much improved. Whether or not that translates onto the field into having a better secondary on the field, how much improvement we will see, that's yet to be seen, but they definitely do have a lot more length and athleticism and speed in their secondary, which should go a long way.
Yeah, definitely. To me, the standout of that is definitely David Benda.
Yeah.
He's going to be the play caller. From what I've heard, he's going to be like the guy in the middle, holding it down. And I think if he plays well, then it's going to mean really great things for this front seven. I think this front seven unit is really going to come together nicely if David Benda is able to, show out in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. Defensive tackle, the last position that I missed. Alfred Collins has stood out in some of Sark's press conferences so far, and that's great news. You'd rather Sark be mentioning his name as like a standout early on in spring than not, because he's going to be relied upon heavily this upcoming year. Savea, the Arizona transfer, has also been looking good, and I think he's going to be at least a solid contributor on this defensive line moving forward. But sources across the industry still believe that once the spring portal window opens on April 15th, Texas is going into the portal to grab at least one other defensive tackle, as they still believe they could use one extra body. So, and that was kind of expected going back to the end of last year, in the end of kind of the first portal window. Texas is still going to go out in the spring and get another defensive tackle or two. So that's where the defensive line stands right now. But yeah, we went through every position in a span of 10 or 15 minutes. So there you go. All right. That's going to do it for episode 56 of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Hope you guys enjoyed. This weekend or next week, we'll be back to preview the Final Four, talk some college baseball, and hopefully talk some more Texas spring football. We have some segments we haven't really done yet. Last year, we ranked the top 10 Longhorns. We might do something similar to that. We will see. Keep your eyes out for that, though, and we'll see you next time. Hook 'em. Peace.
Peace out.